Okay, hello. We're back, and this week we're going to talk about Blue Cross Blue Shield, one of the more common forms of health insurance that we'll see. So let's take a look at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Okay, Blue Cross Blue Shield, again, one of the more common forms of health insurance we'll see. And we see Blue Cross, Blue Shield plans. We're going to cover the billing and notes, the instructions, and how we can complete the claims, which will be in many ways similar to what we've seen in other types of insurance. And again, these are the best known, most common medical insurance plans, right? And they were separate, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And basically, this was like any other form of group insurance in the sense that you could belong to a group, you would pay a premium and get coverage. Initially, the coverage only included hospital bills, and Blue Shield plans covered fees for physician services. Over time, the programs merged, and now we have people referring to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And again, could be Blue Cross New Jersey, Blue Cross California, Anthem, all these other variations. And again, it originally was prepaid, starting in Baylor University Hospital in Dallas, covering teachers, and guaranteed paid up to 21 days of hospitalization per year, and you paid $6 annually, right? And then as time went on, Blue Shield began in a similar way, began as a resolution sponsored by the AMA House of Delegates in 1938. And the idea was get voluntary health insurance, but more directed at covering physician services. First known plan was in Palo Alto, California, and called the California Physician Services. And again, Blue Cross Blue Shield, now it's a trademark. We see their emblem everywhere. And some of these plans have converted to for-profit companies. And again, this, as many things, has to do with money and taxes. A nonprofit pays taxes differently than a for-profit corporation. Nearly all medical practices are for-profit. So if you have a group of providers, they have offices, they have expenses, they have staff, they pay them. If they have a good year, they pay the partners a profit. Hospitals typically, or I would say more often than not, are nonprofit, meaning that whatever money they have left over, they put back into the organization. As a result, they pay lesser taxes. Most academic medical centers have a similar arrangement. You have the physician medical school faculty, they're a for-profit group. Their employees are employees of that group, and the hospital, which has the land and the infrastructure and the more expensive big ticket items, are typically nonprofit. And one of the things when we have providers in networks is we want to make sure they're not only getting good care, but it's cost-effective care. And that's where the concept of utilization management comes in. Utilization management is basically utilizing and keeping the patient at the most appropriate level of care. If you look at the continuum of ICU care on one end, and telehealth at maybe the other or near the other end of it. In between, there's all different types of ranges where we can take care of patients. And that's where utilization management comes in. And so they look at how accessible the care is, how appropriate it is, if it's cost effective, what kind of quality and what kind of treatment options do we have for patients? And utilization management will continue to be a big area of interest for all of us working in health information and healthcare at large. What does a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan do? It's traditionally a fee-for-service model. It involves both indemnity plans and managed care plans. Managed care is basically limiting where you can go for your care. You get a lower rate if you go to these providers that are in network. An indemnity plan gives you more flexibility. And then we have derivatives of that, those two concepts, the federal employee program, the Medicare supplemental plans. People have the impression that Medicare is an entitlement and pays for everything. Even for the Part A hospitalizations, there are certain things that are not covered that are the responsibility of the patient or the patient's insurance. And as we know, traditional fee-for-service plans, we get reimbursed based on a fee schedule that has CPT codes on it, right? And includes both basic coverage and major medical benefits. And again, the indemnity coverage that we talked about, it's similar, but we have the option to receive care from any provider. Typically, these plans cost more. You want more choices? You as the consumer, the healthcare consumer, get to pay for that option. Otherwise, you're in a managed care plan. And the way we control cost is we require the patients to get services from people in our network who contractually agree to pay for services at a certain rate and be reimbursed at a certain rate. And of course, now we have these things that are kind of HMOs and EPOs, kind of a derivative of these things where we have exclusive provider organizations. So we get healthcare services through a network of physicians, hospitals, and patients have to get these services from the network providers, or the patient picks up the entire tab. A health maintenance organization is one that we can think of a model like Kaiser. So in other words, we share all the financial healthcare delivery risk with the provider. It's kind of one global entity with different groups within. We have the permanent team medical group, we have the hospital, we have the health plan. And so as a result, everything is integrated and we can give comprehensive medical services to members in exchange for premiums that are paid every month, either by the employer, the union, or the individual. And then last topic I'll talk about here, the outpatient pretreatment authorization plan. The OPAP requires pre-authorization of all outpatient physical, occupational, and speech therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic. And it's basically a prospective authorization, requires periodic treatment plans to be filed, and it's issued prior to providing these services. And that's all I have for you this time. Come back and we'll talk more about Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans. Bye now.